Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Power Series. This episode is called The Difference Between Your Intuition and Your Fear. So every single week, starting now, I am doing this Power Series, which is a weekly exploration on aspects of being embodied in your own power, discernment, self-trust, being connected to your intuition, and being connected to your mission on the next level. And if we haven't met yet, my name is Margarita Alcantara, and I help new Earth leader entrepreneurs activate their power at the next level so that they can fulfill their mission on Earth. And I decided to create this series because I have been noticing a lot of things going on in the spiritual community. I have been a licensed acupuncturist, a Reiki master teacher, a medicine woman, a mentor to new Earth leaders who are creating change on the Earth. And I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. So I have been noticing a pattern that's been kind of starting to ramp up as we are getting more and more embodied in our power, as more energy is coming into the earth. And I'm noticing that there are a lot of issues around discernment, or lack thereof, should I say. And I really wanted to bring some valuable wisdom to the table. By the end of this video, you'll understand why there's a lack of discernment going on in the spiritual community, what you need to listen to your intuition, how confusing your fear for intuition can show up, how your intuition actually sounds like, and how your fear actually sounds like. And I also put it out there to my community that I was going to answer some questions at the end. So I'm going to share some of that with you and the answers to those questions around your intuition. So if this is something that resonates for you and you want to learn more and you want to follow us along in this series, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. So this is not going to be an Energy 101 kind of thing. If you're interested in that, you're welcome to join me here in Sedona for some Reiki classes. I teach all the levels, and then you can really go into the beginning steps and the basics of Energy 101. But in this video, I'm going to just assume that you are connected to your intuition, you are connected to your energy, and you are wanting some refinement around it, or you're more advanced like I am, and you're always just ready and willing to grow in your intuition and in your power. Let's just get one thing straight. So everyone's got intuition. I am hearing that there are some people who feel like, you know, only some people have intuition, or some people are blessed with it, some people are not. Everyone's got intuition. So that's just across the board. We may talk about it in different ways. Like if you are in the spiritual community, you're going to hear more about, I'm connected to my intuition, I get a vibration, I get a frequency on this. But you'll also see it in corporate. I used to actually be in corporate, and they use different terminology, but they're referring to the same thing. So they'll say things like, I'm trusting my gut on this, or this is my instinct on this situation, right? So there's different terminology, but it's the same thing. We are all connected to our intuition. And when we are connected to our God-given gifts on this earth, our intuition speaks more loudly, and we are able to cultivate our intuition, cultivate our power around our intuition, and really be embodied in our power in a greater way, because you can only be embodied in your power if you are connected to your power, which is connected to your intuition, and if your intuition is clear, and if you are cultivating it actively, and you're also just kind of taking care of the field that you create. So that's also called protection. So I'm going to check some things out here with you. One of the things that I'm noticing these days, which is why the first episode is on noticing the difference between your intuition and fear, is because there's a lot of issues across social media and in the world around discernment. And discernment is really just about being able to tell your own truth from illusion. And there are a lot of people, especially in the community, the spiritual community, to be more specific, who have a lot of trouble with that, because there's a lot of people who are like, oh, but this person says this, and so therefore it's true. Or, I'm seeing a lot of people give their power away to people they see as gurus, or, healers who might know more than them. And the thing is that there are some people who are further along the road than you are, people who have gathered a lot of wisdom in this lifetime and previous lifetimes. But we're all on the same level of really opening up into the next level of our power. And there's always a next level. That's why when people are like, I'm good, I'm already in my power, that's always a warning sign to me, because the reality is that when you're truly in your power, you aren't saying like, I already know it all. I know everything. I know who I am, and I know everything about my power, and I'm already in my power, and I don't need to grow anymore. And there's always room to grow in your power, in your intuition, in, what you're creating here on the planet. There's always a new level. So this comes down to three things, this issue around discernment. It comes around not being connected to your intuition, number one. Number two, not listening to your intuition. And then number three, not believing in your intuition. So if you're noticing yourself in any of those things, don't worry, we're going to go deeper into this and really explore this in a deeper level. And all three things can happen, not being connected to your intuition, not listening to it, not believing in it. That can all happen because at some point you gave your power away when it comes to your intuition. You gave your power away to someone you perceive as having more knowledge than you, being further along than you. And yes, there are people who know more than you, who may be further along than you, but you don't need to give your power away to them, right? Like, I mean, you are already powerful, and you get to be even more powerful when you're connected to your own energy frequency. And I'll tell you what that means in a little bit. And you're connected to who you are, and you're showing up as who the fuck you are, right? So when you've outsourced your power, I hear this often from individuals who are maybe struggling with power right now, or struggling to reclaim their power. They often say, so and so took my power away from me, right? They'll say, this person took my power away from me, and that's why I don't have my power anymore. So I just want to nip this in the bud, because blaming other people for them having your power, it's not because they took it from you. It's because you gave them permission to take it from you. And the good news about that is that you can always call your power back. And it's something that I've shared about in one of my previous videos, an exercise to call your power back. But just to understand that your power belongs to you, and it always does belong to you. Your intuitive power belongs to you, and it will always belong to you. Even if you temporarily outsource it by accident or on purpose or whatever, you can always call your intuition back to you, your power back to you. When people have given their power away, it's often because they're not connected to their power. And more specifically, they don't know what is the difference between their power and others. Like empaths who are kind of not yet empowered, they tend to have this experience, right? Where they feel everyone's feelings, and then after a while, they don't even know where their energy begins and where it ends. And when other people's energy comes in, and where that begins and where that ends. It's just like this whole modge podge of energy, and you're just, connecting to all of it, and there's no discernment, right? So there's no connection to, okay, so this is my energy. Oh, and this belongs to someone else, right? There's no understanding of that. It's just energy is just all over the place. So that's often what I notice when it comes to kind of having given your power away at some point, is because you may not be connected to the own frequency signature of your energy. And that means, what does your energy feel like? Does it feel a certain way? Does it feel like a warmth within you? Does it feel like a knowing? Like, does it look like parameters that you are aware of? Does it sound like something, right? And this is also being very much connected to your clairs. And you've heard clairs such as clairvoyance and clairsentience and things like that. All of those clairs are connected to how you take in your information, your intuition. And so just so we're on the same page, clairvoyance is taking in information through sight, whether it be through your physical eyes or through your third eye, your inner sight. Your clairsentience is when you feel the information like it comes to you in the feeling in your body. Clairaudience is when you can hear it. So this is if you listen to a lot of music and things come to you in like choruses and songs and different words. And claircognizance is when it just literally just drops into your being as knowledge that you never had before. So some of you may have a couple of these. Some of you may have one of these that's super, super strong, that's more developed than others. It can be a mixture of any of that. But when you are connected to your intuition, you already know which Claire you're connected to and which ones, if it's more than one. And you might even be able to like delineate which grade it's at, right? Like you might say, okay, well, I'm claircognizant about 80% of the time, and the other 20% is clairvoyance, right? So you might even be very specific of understanding what your intuitive info comes in as, what it feels like when it does. And so you might be like, oh yeah, so when my claircognizance comes in, it pops in like this. And this is the feeling I get every single time it pops in, right? So there's an understanding of how your intuitive information comes in. And there's an understanding in your soul that you already know how it's going to show up as when it does. So it kind of like leaves a frequency signature, if you will, that you are aware of every single time it comes in. And also, you are very connected to cultivating all of that. And so today's topic is the difference between intuition and fear. And all of this is so important because, just to give you examples, when people are not very discerning with their energy, there's just like so much distraction all over social media. And this is also one of the reasons why I'm showing up, because I wanted to share my take and my own piece of information that I'm going to share to really assist you with how you get to move forward in a more empowered way, right? So one thing that I've been noticing is just there's a lot of people who are channeling, and they love to talk about how they're channels of this star being. I'm the channel of, Mother Mary, I'm the channel of, and all this stuff. And a lot of these people who say they're channels are actually not channeling beings of light. And a lot of that is because they're not often clear in their own energy. They probably don't cultivate any level of energy awareness. They probably don't know what their own energy feels like. They probably don't protect their energy on a regular basis. You should be doing that every day, especially if you do a lot of work, on various levels like I do. You really should be clearing your energy, cultivating your energy, protecting your energy. Those three things are non-negotiable, because when you are not doing those three things on a regular basis, you're likely not as connected to your own intuition as you could be, not as connected to your own energy as you could be. And when you're not really connected to your energy and you're not cultivating it and you're not protecting it, then you end up being like a lot of these people on social media who are channeling God knows what, and it's not even clear. And then when you channel, and like the problem with that, because you're probably thinking, well, what's the problem of that, right? The problem with that is that when you are channeling and your energy is not clear and your intuition is not clear, you are likely not channeling what you think you're channeling. You're probably channeling beings who are not of light, I'll just say. And when you do that, you are sharing stuff, you're sharing a transmission for sure, but it's not of light. And when you do that, you're doing things that will actually create a negative transmission. I'll put it that way, because then you will be channeling, but it won't be a transmission of light. And when you channel and you're not of light, or you're transmitting something that's not of light, then the people who are receiving your transmission are not receiving clear information. And unfortunately, a lot of times, because I've seen this happen before, they actually receive attachments and negative entities and negative frameworks. And, the transmission is received, but it's not of light. And then those people are carrying that around, So that is so important and such a big reason why I'm such a big stickler about being connected to your own intuition and to your own energy, and making sure it's clear and connected and protected. In order to listen to your intuition, you need three things, and I've kind of mentioned this earlier. You need to be clear in your energy, which means also you're clearing your energy. Number two, you're knowing what energy is yours and what isn't, which takes cultivation. It's not something that you download and then suddenly you're just this perfect person who knows exactly what your energy is at, 24/7. And like, it doesn't happen instantly. I know that we are a society that wants things yesterday, but when it comes to true power, which comes from God, right? True power coming through you from God and you being this divine channel of God, right? That comes from, yes, being in that knowledge of you possessing that and you having that God connection within yourself and being connected to that God connection within yourself. But also that takes cultivation. Cultivation takes time. Like I've literally spent my entire life. That's taken many decades to cultivate. So you get to be patient with yourself and you also get to really be all in when it comes to cultivating your your own God light on earth. And that is very much connected to your gifts. Because what do you think your gifts, where do you think your gifts come from, right? It's not from the ether somewhere, it's from God. And so when you are really cultivated in your intuitive gifts and abilities, you are really honing and cultivating that God light within you in such a way that starts to kind of like ping, for the lack of a better term, like it's starting to ping at its own frequency. And then it becomes your own energetic frequency, your own signature. And so this is something that you may already be aware of if you are a spiritual entrepreneur and you do healing work for a living, or you are a light worker for a living, or you guide people through breath work or something like that. There's always this understanding of how you show up, how it feels when you know you're really being clear in your energy, when you know that your clients are receiving the highest version of yourself when you're showing up to do that work with them. So it is important, cultivation. And then thirdly, protecting your energy is part of what you need in order to listen to your intuition at the highest. And so protection, protecting your energy. There were all these things I was exploring about myself when I was younger, but ultimately now that I've like really done a lot of study on myself, on what is around, what is on earth, and really connecting to God, one thing I will tell you is that in terms of protection, if you are not working with the armor of God, if you are not putting that on you, and this is not about religion, okay? So, I don't want to be seeing people in the comments being like, oh my gosh, like she's talking about religion. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about God. God is just across the board, right? So when you are connected to God in a truly deep, authentic, genuine way, where your heart is connected, and you are putting on that armor of God on you, that is really one of the most, if not the most powerful ways you can protect your energy. And that's why you see a lot of all this stuff going on social media with all these people, having meltdowns and being emotionally dysregulated and not being connected to their power and not being grounded in who they are is, they're not connected to that God fractal that they are. And so when you are putting on that armor of God, that is just, it's kind of like this level of sublime protection that you've got going on when you are doing that. So before I go too deep into that, let me get into how confusing your fear for intuition can show up. Because, you might be thinking, I already know my intuition, which is great, but can you discern your intuition from fear? So I'm going to give you some examples of what that can look like. Thinking that the fear that comes up within you before stepping into something big or challenging means that it's not meant for you, or that your guides are telling you that this is a no for you. And I hear this a lot, like where there are a lot of spiritual people and they think anything that feels challenging, everything that makes them a little nervous, everything that, doesn't feel completely lit up 24/7 is not of light, or it's not aligned for them, or it's, not, it's bad, basically. And the reality is that a higher version of yourself, often during those times where there's this thing that that you're being called to do, but it might be challenging, it might be difficult. The reality is that your next level is not going to come from you doing the same thing over and over and over, right? There's going to be a point where what you are meant to be and to become requires a different version of you than what has brought you to this point. So, for instance, if you are expecting to be like, okay, this is your baseline here, and then you're expecting to be here, and you think that all it is just you being like love and lighting your way there, right? Or just thinking positive thoughts and then suddenly you'll embody that. That's not how it works. You actually have to get into the nitty gritty. You've got to do shit you don't want to do. You've got to do things that are very challenging, that make you feel like, wow, I can't do this. It's impossible. There's no way I can handle this. When it's like that, then you know that you're being called up into this next level version of you, which does require a new version of you, which does require you to get out of your comfort zone and to do things you haven't done before. And that is going to feel challenging. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be scary, and it's going to be aligned. And so when people confuse this for fear and be like, oh, this is my guides telling me this is not aligned, right? That's a load of bull, because the reality is that just because it feels uncomfortable does not mean it's not aligned, and doesn't mean that's not your intuition saying, yeah, this is for you. You're ready for this. Let's do this, right? Another way this could show up is when you're choosing between two options and you think that what's easier, more familiar, more comfortable is the aligned path. This is very similar to what I just shared. So, safety does not mean it's aligned. Oftentimes, especially if you're being called higher and being called forward in your path by your higher self, it usually means that it's quite the opposite, because your higher self is going to want to grow you, is going to want you to do new things, different things. But in order for you to do those things, you're going to be kind of like bumping up against a wall with yourself. You'll be in resistance to yourself, because that's really who you're resisting, is you, is your own power during those moments. And so just because it does not feel safe does not mean it's not aligned, because I guarantee you the next version of you and what you're being called forward to be, to become, is going to feel unsafe. It's going to feel like you're about to jump off a cliff, because your ego is going to be like, danger, danger, this is not safe. We've never done this before, right? But just because you've never done it before does not mean it's not safe. It means that it's something you've never done before. And so that's also how it can show up. And another way it can show up is when you're waiting for another sign from the universe, when you've literally had 5 signs, right? Like one after the other, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you're like, okay, let me just, give me another sign, universe, that this is meant to be. By that point, you have already dumbed down your intuition, because you are basically telling yourself in that moment, I do not trust myself. I do not trust my intuition. So I'm going to keep asking and asking because I don't trust it. That's what's really happening when you do that, because your intuition is like a muscle. It gets stronger every single time you use it. And every single time you question it, every single time you're like, oh no, that makes no sense, right? Does that sound familiar? When something comes in and that's the intuition you're getting, but you're like, oh, but that makes no sense. Why would I do that? Like, that makes no sense. And that's inconvenient, right? And I'll tell you something. Oftentimes our intuition will ask us to do things that are not convenient. You know, it'll tell you to go left instead of, make a left instead of a right. And you've taken a left this whole time and it always got you to your destination, right? But your intuition's like, no, let's take a right. And then you might be thinking, well, we've never taken a right before. What if it's not right? What if it's not correct? Because every single time I went left, I always got to where I wanted to go. So that makes no sense for me to go right. And so as you can hear in just like the way I'm processing it in this example, we can quickly talk ourselves out of what our intuition is guiding us towards. When you follow the intuition that comes into your field, and you take a quick action on it and you apply it immediately, that is how you strengthen your intuition. And then vice versa, The way to get further away from your intuition, to get stuck with your intuition, is to receive that intuition and then to question it until the cows come home. Like, oh, but that makes no sense. But that's inconvenient. Why would it tell me that? Because that makes no sense, right? Like, and then you're just questioning it all over if you don't take ownership of the intel that comes in, which you take ownership of it by taking action. And if instead you do the opposite and you get the information and then you question it ad nauseum and then you never take action on it, that's when you make your intuition weaker. And then that's when you get stuck. And that's when you start not knowing what your intuition feels like or sounds like anymore. And then you get out of touch with your intuition. And then all of a sudden now you're saying, oh, I don't have intuition. You have intuition. You just get to listen to it, right? And so here's how intuition shows up. Here's how intuition speaks. So when you're wondering about, is this my intuition? Is this fear? Your intuition, it's going to feel stable. It's going to feel steady. It's not going to be loud and obnoxious. It's just going to be like, here it is. It's not going to need to try to get your attention, but it might be a little quieter. So that's why it's so important for you to be cultivating stillness every single day in your life. Like, I'm not even joking, whether it's meditation or some other like prayer or some other way where you're being still within yourself and you are connecting in with yourself and you're connecting in with your body. That is when you can really hear your intuition the most. It's not going to be super loud. Like it's not going to be loud and obnoxious. It's not going to be like, I'm trying to get your attention. It's just going to be like, here it is. Right? It's going to be very neutral. It's not going to be charged up. It's not going to be emotional. And your body, when you are connected to your intuition, you're gonna open. You're gonna relax. You're gonna lean in energetically or literally. You're gonna lean in and you're gonna be like, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do. Even if you're scared, right? Like even if you're being called to do something that petrifies the crap out of you, you're still going to be like, ooh, I'm a little excited about this. I'm opening to this. So that's when you know that's your intuition. Your fear, on the other hand, is going to be kind of like the mean girl. So your fear is going to come in with judgment. Like, who do you think you're going to be? Who do you think you are? Right? Like there are a lot of people in the spiritual community, those who have not taken ownership of who they are yet in terms of their power, and also those who are more seasoned, who are opening into a next level of their power and they're still holding back. There can be that mean girl within them that's like, who do you think you are to think that you are all that? Right? Who do you think you are? You think you're all that? You think you're that important? That's your fear. That is the voice of your fear. But when your fear speaks and it's urgent, it's kind of like you're going to miss the boat. You're going to fail if you don't do this. It's kind of like that mean girl. It's going to sound judgy. It's going to sound like urgent. It's going to be like, you're a loser if you don't do this. It's going to be also loud. It's going to be obnoxious. And then what it feels like in your body, it feels like constriction. It feels like, oh, I'm just going to close into myself, right? Like that's what it feels like, ugh. Like, I mean, and you might even literally do that with your body where your shoulders start to come in a little bit and you're just like, oh, no, like you just start closing in. And that's because you're not open to that. Like it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. You're also operating from whatever operating system that you've grown up with. And if you haven't done the work around that and you haven't done that awareness work around yourself to understand like, oh, this is coming, this concern or this fear is actually coming from when I was 4 and this happened in my family, that kind of thing. If you don't have that level of awareness, then you get to do that work too, because it's important to have that level of self-awareness to know like where your reactions are coming from, because your reactions come from belief systems. Belief systems come from what you experience, what stories you create around those experiences, which then create your belief systems, which then influences the actions you do in the world. So you catch my drift. So that is how you tell the difference between your intuition and your fear. And also, I shared with you about really being connected and clear in your energy. Number one, knowing what your energy is yours and what it isn't, and also protecting your energy. When people are talking about remote viewing, which is basically when you tap into other people's fields and you start like reading them, basically. That is a very slippery slope because if you are actually doing your energy cultivation appropriately, you are not open to all of these people who are trying to tap into your energy and trying to pick up on you and trying to pick up your field and see what's going on with you. Like, I mean, you already have this protection around you where you're not accessible for that. And if that's the case, and then there are these people who are saying, I'm remote viewing so and so. Like, if this person has protection around them, what are they picking up? It's probably not something of light. And that whole remote viewing thing, there's also consent. You know what I mean? And that's something that a lot of people who don't actually practice energy work don't understand is that you need consent in order to do that kind of work where you're remote viewing and all this other stuff. Like you don't just like invade their energy field and be like, okay, now I'm going to read you and tell it to my YouTube channel, right? Like that's not really the recommended way of how you get to show up because that's also not an integrity. You want to really make sure that if you're even doing that at all, there's like a certain integrity level that starts to get breached a little bit when you do that like a lot, because not everyone is giving you consent to their field, which then begs the question, well, then what are you connecting with? So just putting that out there. So now I'm going to answer some questions. So the first one is, what does it mean when my intuition says one thing, but it shows up in an entirely different way? So this came in from someone who's in my email community, and she was asking me this, and this is a great question because actually this is kind of a common question. So there are a few different reasons why. One reason is that maybe the intuitive read wasn't accurate. That's a possibility. Another reason is that things could have changed, like when you are tapping into your intuitive field, you are getting a snapshot at that very moment in time. And between now and then the timing of everything unfolding, there are a lot of things that can transpire. We have free will, and so free will changes everything. So what I would say is that when you're intuiting what you want to tap into, what you're trying to get an answer on, make sure you're not attached to it. Say you want to get an answer about a certain situation, you tap into your intuition, you get the information, and then, that can give you an understanding in that moment of maybe what your next steps get to look like in order to make that desirable event happen. And so you can go ahead and take those next steps. Sometimes what it turns out to be might not be exactly what you thought it would be or what you were told it's going to be. No, maybe you didn't hear it correctly. That's possible. And maybe what you might get is if you tap in and you're like, oh, I heard differently than this outcome. And you might get back that something new came in. The second question I got is, I trusted my intuition before and it brought me on the wrong path. What is up with that? So, and I hear this one a lot too. Typically, when that happens, I would say it's because you probably listened to what you wanted it to be, right? You might have had an attachment to how the outcome was going to be, which means that maybe you weren't entirely clear and still within yourself at the time that you were intuiting that information. That then you might have been micromanaging the outcome a little bit. You know what I mean? We've done that. I've done that before, where you're like, well, it's supposed to be like this, and the outcome is supposed to be this. So like if it looks like it's doing this, then I'm gonna move things around. I'm going to control things a little bit, and so that it happens the way I want it to. And that's not really following your intuition. That's just being a control freak, right? And that's just you not trusting God, basically, because when you try to micromanage things in your life, I mean, that really comes from fear. And that comes from fear of, if I do not micromanage these things, then I'm not going to get what I want. And more specifically, I'm not going to be supported. And so that's just like my 2 cents on that thing. I don't want to go too deep into, a rabbit hole on that. But also another question I would pose to you, if you feel that you've trusted your intuition before and it's taking you down the wrong path, what if that was the right path? And just because you didn't like how it turned out doesn't mean it's the wrong path, right? Because sometimes you need something in order to get somewhere else. And so maybe it was kind of like the stop before the stop, if you know what I mean. And what if it actually was the right path? What if it is what you needed so that you could like learn something so that you could go to what's next? And so either you weren't listening to your intuition at that time, if you were truly led astray, or you did listen to your intuition and it brought you exactly where you needed to be. Because one thing is that sometimes you're going to get exactly what you wanted, and sometimes you're going to just get exactly what you needed. And sometimes you need what you need first in order to get what you want. So I hope you're picking up what I'm putting down here. I'm hoping that this has really served you. Just to recap, we talked about why there's a lack of discernment going on in the spiritual community, what you need to listen to your intuition, how confusing your fear for intuition can show up, how your intuition actually sounds like, what your fear actually sounds like, and shared some questions at the end. So I hope this helped you, and I hope this gave you some clarity on your intuition, because this is, again, not like, intuition 101 or energy 101, because no matter where you're at on your path, there's always room to grow. There's always room to expand. There's always room to learn more. And so if you are really receiving today's transmission, maybe you're starting to apply whatever I've shared with a new lens for yourself. So what's one takeaway that you've learned in today's conversation that challenges the way that you're thinking about your intuition? I'd love to hear it. Tell me in the comments. And also, I want to share that next week we're going to talk about a very juicy topic and oftentimes a triggering topic when it comes to the spiritual community. So this should be interesting. It's going to be episode 2, the title of which is called "The Real Reason So Many Spiritual People Struggle with Money, and It's Not What You Think." So I invite you to join us. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to this channel so you will be notified when the episode 2 and all the other subsequent episodes go live. And I would love to hear from you. So let me know and share in the comments what this brought up for you in regards to your intuition. And I'll see you next time.